The late afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains of the cozy Chicago brownstone, casting delicate patterns across the living room where Sarah Mitchell stood, her hands trembling as she clutched a crumpled birthday card. Today was her 35th birthday, a milestone she'd once imagined celebrating with joy, surrounded by her husband, David Thompson, and their 10-year-old son, Ethan. Instead, the house was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a neighbor's lawnmower. Sarah's chestnut hair, once meticulously styled, now hung in a messy bun, strands clinging to her sweat-dampened neck as she stared at the empty dining table. She'd spent the morning baking a cake chocolate with vanilla frosting. Ethan's favorite, hoping to share a moment with her family. But the cake sat untouched, the candles unlit, and the weight of her loneliness pressed against her chest like a stone. David and Ethan were gone off to a special event they'd vaguely mentioned that morning, leaving her with a vague promise to be back soon. Sarah's hazel eyes stung with unshed tears as she smoothed the card, a generic happy birthday message she'd bought for herself, a small act of defiance against the neglect she'd grown accustomed to over 10 years of marriage. She sank into a chair, her fingers tracing the edge of the table, her mind drifting to the life she'd once envisioned. A decade ago, Sarah had been a rising star at Northwestern University, a computer science prodigy whose algorithms had won national coding competitions. Her professors had called her a genius, her peers had envied her effortless brilliance, and she'd dreamed of leading tech innovations, perhaps even founding her own startup. But then she met David, a charming business major with a quick smile and a knack for making her feel like the only person in the room. He'd swept her off her feet, especially after that terrifying night in her sophomore year when a fire broke out in the dorms. Smoke had filled the halls, and Sarah, trapped in her room, had nearly succumbed to panic when a figure burst through the door, pulling her to safety. She'd never seen his face clearly in the chaos, but she'd clung to David's story that he was her savior, a narrative that cemented her love for him. They married a year after graduation, and when Ethan was born, Sarah made the choice to step back from her career, believing she could find fulfillment as a wife and mother. She'd traded lines of code for laundry and PTA meetings, convincing herself it was temporary that she'd return to tech when Ethan was older. But the years slipped by, and her dreams gathered dust buried under the weight of domesticity. Now, as she sat alone on her birthday, the truth was undeniable. Her sacrifices had gone unnoticed. David, once attentive, had grown distant, his focus consumed by his tech startup, Thompson Innovations, and his lingering affection for Emily Harper, his high school sweetheart, who'd recently moved back to Chicago. Emily was everything Sarah felt she no longer was: glamorous, carefree, unburdened by the stretch marks and exhaustion that came with motherhood. Sarah's body bore the scars of her pregnancy, a cesarean scar across her abdomen, stretch marks that spiderwebbed across her stomach, and David's casual remarks about her appearance cut deeper than she'd ever admit. "You've let yourself go," he'd said once, half joking, as she stood in the kitchen apron stained with spaghetti sauce. She'd laughed it off then, but the words lingered, festering like an untreated wound. Ethan, too, seemed to prefer Emily's company, drawn to her easy laughter, and the way she let him play video games without enforcing homework. "Aunt Emily's so cool," he'd said last week, his words slicing through Sarah's heart. "She's not strict like you." Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her reverie. A text from David running late. Took Ethan to Emily's for her dog's birthday party. Back by dinner. Sarah's breath caught a bitter laugh escaping her lips. A dog's birthday party. For Emily's golden retriever, Max. She scrolled through her messages, finding a group chat she hadn't been included in where David and his friends were planning the event. Photos popped up, Ethan grinning as he held a dog-shaped balloon, David toasting with Emily, whose blonde hair gleamed under string lights in her backyard. The caption read, "Happy 5th to Max. Thanks for making it special." Emily Sarah's vision blurred with tears, but anger quickly overtook the hurt. She'd spent the day cleaning, cooking, hoping for a moment of connection, and they were celebrating a dog's birthday. The betrayal stung, but it was Ethan's smile in the photo that broke her. Her own son choosing Emily over her. She stood pacing the living room, her bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. The house, once a symbol of their shared dreams, felt like a cage. She wandered to the mirror in the hallway, staring at her reflection. The woman looking back was a stranger, pale, tired with dark circles under her eyes. She thought of her college days, the nights spent coding until dawn, the thrill of solving complex problems. She'd been Athena back then, an anonymous handle on coding forums where she'd built games that went viral among tech enthusiasts. Her last project, a puzzle game called Time Vortex, still generated buzz online, though she'd stepped away from the spotlight after marriage. David had never understood her passion, dismissing it as a hobby that wouldn't pay the bills. Focus on the family, he'd said, and she'd complied, believing it was her duty. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a voice message from David. His voice was slurred, likely from one too many beers at Emily's. "Sarah, where's my blue tie? And why isn't dinner ready? You know, I've got a big meeting tomorrow." The message ended with laughter in the background, Emily's unmistakable and bright. Sarah's grip tightened on the phone, her knuckles white. She played the message again, then a third time, each word fueling her resolve. She thought of the diary she'd kept hidden in her nightstand, where she'd poured out her frustrations. "I work so hard for this family, but David brings her into our home. I feel like an outsider." She'd written about the fire too, how David's heroism had convinced her he was her protector. But now she wondered if she'd been wrong about him all along. The front door creaked open, and Ethan bounded in his sneakers, muddy on the clean floor. Aunt Emily's party was awesome. Max got a cake." David followed, loosening his tie, his face flushed from drinking. "Sarah, you didn't answer my message," he said, not meeting her eyes. "What's with the attitude? And where's dinner?" Sarah's voice was steady, surprising even herself. "You were at Emily's dog's birthday party. On my birthday." David shrugged, tossing his jacket on the couch. "It's just a dog, Sarah. Don't make a big deal out of it. Emily's alone, she needed us there." Ethan chimed in, "Yeah, Mom, you should have come. Aunt Emily's so nice. Not like you always yelling about homework." The room spun, and Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "Nice," she said, her voice rising. "I spent all day making a cake for us, Ethan. For my birthday. And you were at her house celebrating a dog." David rolled his eyes. "You're being dramatic. Emily's been through a lot. You could be more understanding." Sarah's laugh was sharp, cutting through the tension. "Understanding? For 10 years I've been understanding. I gave up my career, my dreams for you. And you repay me by prioritizing her and her dog." David's face hardened. "Don't start with that career nonsense again. You chose to stay home. Nobody forced you." The words hit like a slap, but they also ignited something within her. She thought of the fire, the smoke choking her lungs, the stranger who'd carried her to safety. She'd built her life around David because of that moment, but now she saw him clearly. A man who diminished her, who compared her to Emily at every turn. "You know what she said?" Her voice calm, but resolute. "I'm done. I want a divorce." David laughed, a cruel edge to it. "Divorce? You're nothing without me, Sarah. A housewife with no skills, no money. You think you can make it on your own?" Ethan's eyes widened, but he said nothing, clutching his backpack. Sarah's heart ached, but she stood taller. "I'm not nothing," she said, "and I'm not staying in a marriage that makes me feel like I am." She walked to the bedroom, grabbing a suitcase from the closet. David followed, still talking. "You'll come crawling back, Sarah. You can't survive without me. And Ethan, he doesn't even want you." The words stung, but she kept packing jeans, a laptop she hadn't touched in years. The diary that held her truth. Ethan stood in the doorway, his face pale. "Mom, don't go. I want to stay with Dad and Aunt Emily." Sarah's throat tightened, but she knelt in front of him. "I love you, Ethan, but I need to do this for me." She kissed his forehead, then stood, meeting David's gaze. "You'll hear from my lawyer." As she stepped into the cool Chicago night, the suitcase heavy in her hand, Sarah felt a mix of fear and freedom. The city lights stretched before her, a reminder of the world she'd once planned to conquer. She didn't know where she'd go, maybe a cheap apartment, maybe a new city. But she knew one thing: she was done letting others define her worth. Somewhere deep inside, Athena stirred, ready to rise again. The fire that had nearly consumed her all those years ago had left scars, but it hadn't destroyed her. And neither would this. Sarah Mitchell stepped off the Greyhound bus into the bustling heart of San Francisco, her suitcase battered from the long journey from Chicago. The salty breeze from the bay mingled with the scent of coffee from a nearby cafe, and the city's energy pulsed around her, tech workers in hoodies, street musicians strumming guitars, and the distant clang of cable cars. It was a far cry from the quiet routine of her old life, where days revolved around school drop-offs and David's endless demands. At 35, with no job, a thin savings account, and a divorce pending, Sarah felt both terrified and exhilarated. She'd rented a tiny studio apartment in the Mission District, a cramped space with peeling paint and a single window overlooking a noisy street. It wasn't much, but it was hers, the first thing she'd claimed for herself in a decade. As she unpacked her laptop, the one relic of her past life as a coder, she felt a spark of something she hadn't in years possibility. The screen glowed to life, and she logged into an old coding forum under her alias, Athena, where her last project, Time Vortex, still had a cult following. Comments from users begged for updates, unaware that Athena had vanished into motherhood. Sarah's fingers hovered over the keyboard, itching to code again to reclaim the brilliance she'd buried for David and Ethan. Her first week in San Francisco was a whirlwind of rejection. Job applications went unanswered, and recruiters scoffed at her 7-year resume gap. "What have you been doing all this time?" one asked over a Zoom call, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Raising a family." Sarah replied, her voice steady, despite the flush creeping up her neck. "But I've kept up with coding, self-study, open-source projects." The recruiter's eyes glazed over, and the call ended with a vague promise to keep her in mind. Sarah's confidence wavered, but she refused to give up. She spent nights poring over new algorithms, brushing up on Python and JavaScript, determined to prove she wasn't just a housewife with no skills, as David had called her. Her diary, now a constant companion filled with new entries. "I'm not nothing. I'm Athena. I just need one chance to show it." That chance came when she landed an interview at StarTech, a rising tech company in Silicon Valley known for its innovative gaming apps. The glass-walled office in Palo Alto buzzed with young engineers, their desks cluttered with energy drinks and dual monitors. Sarah, in a thrift store blazer and her only pair of unworn jeans, felt out of place among the confident 20-somethings. The interviewer, a smug man named Greg, barely glanced at her resume. 7 years out of the game," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Tech moves fast, Mrs. Thompson. You sure you can keep up? Sarah bristled at the name. She was Sarah Mitchell now, but kept her composure. It's Ms. Mitchell, and I'd like a chance to prove myself. Greg smirked, handing her a coding challenge. Fix this bug in our beta app. It's been stumping our team for days. You've got 10 minutes. Sarah's heart raced as she opened the laptop, the screen displaying a tangled mess of code. The bug was in the rendering engine of a new game, causing characters to freeze mid-animation. She recognized the issue instantly, a memory leak in the rendering loop, a problem she'd tackled years ago in Time Vortex. Her fingers flew across the keyboard lines of code, flowing like a forgotten language she'd never stopped speaking. In 6 minutes, she'd patched the bug, tested the fix, and handed the laptop back to Greg. His smirk faltered as he ran the app, the characters now moving smoothly. How did you... He started, but Sarah cut him off. I'm Athena, she said, the name slipping out before she could stop it. Greg's eyes widened. The Athena. From Time Vortex. No way. Sarah nodded, her confidence surging. Test me again if you don't believe me. Before Greg could respond, a man entered the room, tall with sharp blue eyes and a quiet authority. James Carter, StarTech's CEO, had been watching from the doorway. I believe her, he said, his voice calm but firm. Sarah, right. I've seen your work online. Athena's a legend in gaming circles. Sarah's breath caught. She hadn't expected anyone to recognize her alias, let alone the CEO. James offered her a temporary contract on the spot, promising a full-time role if she proved herself. As she left the office, her heart pounded with a mix of pride and disbelief. For the first time in years, she felt seen not as David's wife or Ethan's mom, but as Sarah the coder, who could still change the game. Back in Chicago, David wasn't taking her departure lightly. He'd texted her daily, alternating between anger and mockery. You'll be back when you realize you can't hack it, one message read. Worse, Sarah learned from a mutual friend that David and Emily were spreading rumors, claiming she'd abandoned her family for a midlife crisis. The gossip reached San Francisco's tech scene, where a recruiter at another firm had asked, "Aren't you the one who ran off from her kid?" Sarah's cheeks burned, but she refused to let their words define her. She threw herself into her work at StarTech, debugging code, optimizing algorithms, and earning grudging respect from her colleagues. Greg, still stung by her performance, muttered about her lucky break, but others began seeking her input. Impressed by her knack for solving problems they couldn't. One evening, as Sarah worked late in the StarTech office, James stopped by her desk. "You're a natural," he said, leaning against the wall. "Why'd you stay away so long?" Sarah hesitated, then told him about her marriage, the sacrifices, the betrayal. James listened, his expression unreadable. "You remind me of someone I knew in college," he said finally. "She was brilliant too, but life got in the way." Sarah smiled faintly, sensing a story behind his words, but not pressing. James's support was a lifeline. She wasn't just a coder to him. She was a person with a past and a future. He assigned her to a high-stakes project, a new game called Starfall, set to compete with Thomson Innovation's latest release. The pressure was immense, but Sarah thrived on it, her nights filled with code and her days with purpose. Yet, the rumors from Chicago persisted. Emily, now working with David at Thomson Innovations, posted cryptic social media updates, hinting at Sarah's instability. One post showed Ethan at a park, with Emily captioned, "Family time with my favorite kid." Sarah's heart ached. She hadn't spoken to Ethan since leaving. His last words still echoing, "I want to stay with Dad and Aunt Emily." She wrote him letters, sent texts, but got no reply. The pain threatened to derail her, but She channeled it into her work, determined to prove she was more than the broken housewife David painted her as. Her diary entries grew fiercer. "I'm not just fighting for a job. I'm fighting for me." At StarTech, Sarah's skills shone. She optimized Starfall's AI, making the game's characters more responsive and lifelike, earning praise from the team. But the competition with Thompson Innovations loomed. David's company was pitching a similar game, and Sarah knew he'd stop at nothing to win. One night, she overheard Greg on a call mentioning intel from Thompson Innovations. Suspicious, she checked the project's secure server and found evidence of an attempted hack. Someone had tried to access Starfall's code. She couldn't prove it was David or Emily, but the timing felt too convenient. She reported it to James, who tightened security and commended her vigilance. "You're not just saving the game," he said. "You're saving us." As the project deadline neared, Sarah faced a new challenge, a public demo of Starfall at a San Francisco Tech Expo. The event would pit StarTech against Thompson Innovations, and Sarah knew David would be there, likely with Emily. The thought of facing them, her ex-husband, his glamorous first love, and the whispers of their rumors, made her stomach churn. But she also felt a fire within her, the same drive that had powered Athena through sleepless coding nights. She wasn't the Sarah who'd baked a birthday cake no one ate. She was Athena, and she was ready to fight for her place in the world. The expo was days away, and Sarah worked tirelessly refining your Starfall's code and preparing for the demo. James noticed her late hours and brought her coffee one evening, his presence a quiet comfort. "You've got this," he said. "Show them what Athena can do." Sarah nodded, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just proving herself to David or Emily, she was proving it to herself. The city lights glittered outside the office window, a reminder of the new life she was building. Whatever happened at the expo, Sarah knew one thing: she was no longer the woman who'd let her dreams slip away. Athena was back, and she was just getting started. The San Francisco Tech Expo buzzed with energy, a kaleidoscope of flashing screens, chattering crowds, and the hum of cutting-edge technology. Sarah Mitchell stood backstage at the Moscone Center, her heart pounding as she adjusted her earpiece, preparing to demo Starfall for a packed audience of investors, tech journalists, and industry giants. At 35, she felt like she was stepping back into the spotlight she'd abandoned a decade ago when she'd traded her identity as Athena the coding prodigy for the role of David Thompson's wife and Ethan's mother. Now, with her divorce papers signed, just a formality, after months of legal back and forth, she was ready to reclaim her place in the world. Her navy blazer and crisp white blouse felt like armor, and the laptop in her hands was a weapon forged from years of quiet determination. StarTech's booth, sleek with holographic displays of Starfall's vibrant game world, stood opposite Thompson Innovations, where David and his team, including Emily Harper, prepared their own pitch. Sarah caught a glimpse of David's confident smirk as he schmoozed with investors, Emily at his side, in a tailored red dress, her laughter carrying over the crowd. The sight stirred a flicker of doubt, but Sarah pushed it down. This wasn't about them. It was about her. The past months at StarTech had transformed her. Since fixing that critical bug in her interview, Sarah had become the team's linchpin, her algorithms boosting Starfall's performance to levels that had analysts buzzing. Her colleagues, once skeptical, now called her Athena, with a mix of awe and camaraderie. James Carter, StarTech's CEO, had been her biggest ally, his quiet encouragement a stark contrast to David's dismissive jabs. But the rumors David and Emily spread calling her an unstable housewife who'd abandoned her son still lingered, whispered in tech forums and cocktail hours. Sarah had learned to ignore them, focusing instead on her work and the occasional letter she sent to Ethan, though his silence hurt more than she admitted. Her diary, now filled with pages of code snippets and affirmations, held her truth. I'm not nothing. I'm Athena, and I'm enough. The expo was the culmination of her journey, a chance to prove it. StarTech was competing for a billion-dollar contract with Nexus Games, a Seattle-based giant looking for a partner to develop their next AAA title. Mystic Quest. Thompson Innovations was the main rival, and Sarah knew David had pulled out all the stops, leveraging his charm and Emily's connections. But she'd discovered something unsettling days before an internal audit revealed that someone had accessed Starfall's secure server, downloading a draft of their proposal. The IP address traced back to a Chicago-based VPN, and though she couldn't prove it, Sarah suspected Emily, who'd been spotted lingering near StarTech's offices. James had dismissed it as a coincidence, but Sarah wasn't so sure. She'd quietly prepared a backup plan, tweaking Starfall's demo to showcase a unique AI feature. She'd developed a dynamic storytelling engine that adapted to player choices in real time. If David and Emily had stolen the original proposal, they'd be pitching an outdated version. As the lights dimmed and the announcer called StarTech to the stage, Sarah took a deep breath. James squeezed her shoulder, his blue eyes steady. "You've got this, Athena," he said. She nodded, stepping into the spotlight. The demo went flawlessly. Starfall's visuals dazzled its AI, responding seamlessly to live inputs from the audience. Gasps and applause filled the room as Sarah explained her algorithms, her voice confident and clear. She glanced at David, whose face tightened with every cheer. Emily, standing beside him, whispered furiously, her expression souring. When Thompson Innovations took the stage, their game, a derivative action title, felt flat, its mechanics eerily similar to Starfall's old draft. The audience murmured, sensing the lack of originality. Sarah's suspicion was confirmed. They'd stolen her work, but they hadn't anticipated her last-minute pivot. After the demos, the Nexus Games CEO Laura Chen announced the results. For innovation, technical excellence, and vision, the contract goes to StarTech, led by Sarah Mitchell's team. The crowd erupted, and Sarah's team swarmed her, cheering. James grinned, whispering, "You did it." Sarah's heart soared, but the victory was bittersweet. Across the room, David's face was a mask of fury. Emily's pale with shock. As the crowd dispersed, David stormed over, his voice low and venomous. "You set us up, didn't you? You leaked a fake proposal to sabotage me." Sarah met his gaze, unflinching. "No, David. You sabotaged yourself. I just played smarter." Emily interjected, her voice shrill. "You're nothing but a bitter ex-wife, Sarah. You think this makes you better than me?" Sarah's laugh was cold. "I don't need to be better than you, Emily. I'm better than I was." Before David could respond, security approached, accompanied by a police officer. James stepped forward, holding a tablet. "We have evidence," he said. "Server logs show an unauthorized access from your IP, Emily, and a witness saw you near our office last week. The police want to discuss corporate espionage." Emily's face crumpled, and she turned to David, pleading, "I did it for us, for the company." David pushed her away, his voice shaking. "You did this for yourself. I trusted you." As security escorted Emily out, David turned to Sarah, his eyes desperate. "Sarah, I was wrong. I ignored you, belittled you. I see now how brilliant you are. Can we try again for Ethan?" Sarah's chest tightened at her son's name, but she shook her head. "You had 10 years, David. I'm done living in your shadow." The mention of Ethan stung. She'd received a letter from him that morning, scrawled in his messy handwriting, "Mom, I'm sorry I was mean. I miss you. Aunt Emily told me to say those things." Sarah had cried reading it, but she hadn't replied yet. unsure how to rebuild that bond. As the expo wound down, she stepped outside, needing air. James followed his presence, a quiet comfort. "You okay?" he asked. Sarah nodded, then hesitated. There's something I need to know. That fire at Northwestern, the one where I was trapped. David said he saved me, but I've been thinking. Was it you?" James looked away, then back at her, his voice soft. "Yeah, it was me. I didn't say anything because you were happy with David. I didn't want to complicate things." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from clarity. "Thank you," she said, "for then and for now." James smiled faintly. "You don't owe me anything, Sarah. You're Athena. You've always had the strength to save yourself." He paused, then added, "Nexus wants you in Seattle to lead Mystic Quest. It's a big move. You ready?" Sarah thought of Ethan, of the letters she'd write, the visits she'd plan. She thought of the diary she'd filled with pain and hope, and the code that had brought her back to life. "I'm ready," she said. A week later, she stood in a sleek Seattle apartment, her new home overlooking Puget Sound. Her laptop was open. Mystic Quest's code, waiting for her touch. She wrote in her diary, "I'm free. Not because of anyone else, but because I chose me." The lessons of her journey were clear-etched into every line of code and every step she'd taken. First, she'd learned to value herself, to reject the voices David's, Emily's, even her own doubts that tried to define her worth. Second, she'd discovered resilience, rising from rejection and betrayal to reclaim her brilliance. Finally, she understood true freedom, living authentically, not for others' approval, but for her own fulfillment. As she looked out at the water, Sarah knew she wasn't just Athena, the coder, or Sarah the mother. She was both, and so much more, a woman who'd faced the fire and emerged stronger, ready to shape her own future.